Hello everyone. Ravi, I would request you to give the rights to Dr. Pal so that he can share his screen. Sir, now you can present your screen.
Okay. I'm presenting. Is it seen?
It's coming, sir. It's coming.
Okay. Shall I make full screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just give me a minute. Is it okay?
Yes, sir, we can see that.
Okay. Right, shall I start now?
Sure, sir, you can start.
Okay, am I audible to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so I'm beginning now. Okay, a very good evening, students, and some of my colleagues. Okay, the junior and senior teachers are also attending this webinar. So I welcome to all of you. Let me introduce you first. My name is Professor GP Pal, and I am the professor of human anatomy, right? Okay, I have a teaching experience of about 46 years and have published around a dozen books in the various subdisciplines of the human anatomy. At the outset, I will like to thank you all for attending this seminar, okay? You have taken out your time, right? And especially for the teachers. Just a minute, I got a call, okay. Anyway. Okay, sorry for these interruptions. Okay, at the outset, I would like to thank you all for attending this seminar, all the students, all the teachers who are attending here. I'm really thankful to you. And I am also thankful to my publisher, the Wolters Kluwer, who has invited me to deliver this seminar. Okay, they are the publisher of my two books. The one is the illustrated textbook of neuroanatomy, which is a huge book where all the details of neuroanatomies are given. Those who want to study the neuroanatomy in great detail, they are referring to those books. Then I have also published a smaller version of this book, and that is for the medical student, okay, because it is not containing a lot of the details which are there, okay. In the next 45 minutes, I shall talk on the spinal cord, and for the first few slides, I will be just passing them very rapidly because you must be knowing, since you are exam going now, so you must have already studied this part of the spinal cord. But then I will become slow and will try to explain you at each and every slide at the great, length, okay? Now, coming to the first slide. Now see, spinal cord, okay? This is in continuation to the medulla oblongata. I'm just moving my pointer, which is in white color arrow, and this is on the first diagram, which is on the side here, and this is in continuation with that of the medulla oblongata and just lies into the vertebral canal. So the location of the spinal cord is in the vertebral canal. It is a cylindrical structure, and this is not extending in the whole of the length of the vertebral canal, but it is extending in its upper two-thirds. That means the lower one-third of the vertebral canal is just without the spinal cord, and this fact you must have studied. Your teachers must have told you that it is utilized for the lumbar puncture, usually between L3 and L4, okay, because here there are only the spinal nerves and the cerebrospinal fluid is present in the subarachnoid space, so you have no danger to injure the spinal cord, okay. Now, if you see the extent of this spinal cord, it extends from the upper border of C1, cervical first vertebrae here. See from the upper, where it is in junction with that of the lower end of the medulla oblongata, and then it is extending right up to the lower border of the L1 vertebrae, lumbar 1 vertebrae, that you all know. The length of the spinal cord is 45 centimeter and weight is about 30 grams, okay? Now, if you will see the spinal cord in its whole length in this side diagram again here, you will see that it is a cylindrical structure, but it is not cylindrical in the whole of its extent. Most of the cylindrical part is present in the middle part where it is the thoracic part of the spinal cord. At its upper end, near the where it is the cervical part of the spinal cord, there is a fusiform swelling, and this is called as the cervical enlargement. Similarly, there is a fusiform swelling at the lower end of the spinal cord here, and this is called as the lumbosacral enlargement, since it is made up of the lumbar and the sacral vertebrae, say the sacral part of the spinal cord, okay, which extend from L1 to S3. Now, these enlargements are also known as the limb enlargement, because this enlargement are because of the deposition of the gray matter, excessive deposition of the gray matter, which contain plenty of the motoneurons and sensory neurons, because they have ultimately to supply to the muscles of the limb. In case of the cervical enlargement between C4 and T1, they give origin to the brachial plexus, and in the lower fusiform swelling, the lumbosacral enlargement, they give origin to the two plexus, lumbar and sacral plexus, which go and supply the muscles of the lower limb. And that's why these enlargements are there, because they have ultimately to innervate to the large, huge number of muscle, a huge amount of the muscle mass which is present in the lower and to the upper limb. Okay, I hope you know everything about this. Okay, now coming to the external feature quickly. Now there is the terminal end or the lower end of the spinal cord. See where is my arrow is moving. This is it is conical in shape, and it is called as the conus medullary. That is the terminal end which lies at the level of the L1 vertebrae, lower border of L1, which this level can increase. Say it may go up in case of the extension. Say in case of the flexion, and go down in case of the extension of the vertebral column. Okay. Now this conus medullaris, it is surrounded by the bunch of the spinal nerves, and this bunch of the spinal nerves, they are called as cauda equina. You must have read, which resembles to the hairs coming out from the tip of the tail of a horse. That's why it is called as cauda. So many nerves are coming out from this small enlargement, that is the lumbosacral enlargement, and all these spinal nerves, they are just going downwards and laterally. See this bunch on either side of the conus medullaris. In this diagram also, they are going downwards and laterally. And why they are going downwards and laterally, this bunch which is taking origin from the lumbar part of the spinal cord, lower thoracic, lumbar and sacral, because they are going to the corresponding intervertebral foramina to come out of the vertebral canal. And why they are just forming a bunch here, because if you see the spinal cord of an fetus, okay, early fetus, say for example in third or the fourth month of the fetal age, what you will see that the length of the spinal cord and that of the vertebral column is almost equal, so that all those spinal nerves which are coming from the spinal cord, they are going to the respective vertebral foramina. Okay, but as the age advances after the birth, what happens that there is not even before birth also, okay, and after birth it grows. The vertebral column grows rapidly as compared to that of the spinal cord, but since the spinal nerves, they are coming out from the respective foramina, they have to travel lower down, okay, because the spinal cord becomes short and the vertebral canal and vertebral column become longer as compared to that of the spinal cord. And that is the reason why the bunch of the spinal nerves are found, okay, and why the conus medullaris lies at the lower level or lower border of the L1 vertebrae. Passing quickly, since the spinal cord is here, and in both the diagrams you are seeing that the spinal nerves are coming. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves, which are 31 from right side and 31 are coming from the left side, and they are coming from the equal number of the spinal segment. So there are 31 pairs of spinal nerve, and similarly there are 31 pairs of the spinal cord segment. Now I will move to the spinal cord segment. Okay, when you define a spinal cord segment, which you must be knowing already, it is the portion of the cord. Let me move the arrow here. It is the portion of the cord to which a pair of the dorsal and the ventral spinal root. See this. This is the ventral spinal rootlets which forms the ventral spinal root. These are the dorsal spinal rootlets which forms the dorsal spinal root. Okay. Then this is the site from where they are coming out on either side, right side and left side from the spinal cord, and this portion of the spinal cord is defined as a spinal cord segment. So how many segments are seen in this diagram? There are 3 segments are seen because there are the 3 pairs of the spinal nerves. They are attached to the spinal cord on one side. Okay, diagram is showing on, but imagine that it is the same case onto the other side also. Okay, now since I have said that there are 31 spinal segments, okay, of the spinal cord, so there are 31 pairs of the spinal nerve. Let us come very quickly about the external features of the spinal cord. In this diagram, in the midline of the spinal cord, and we are seeing the ventral aspect of the spinal cord. This is called as the anterior median fissure, and this has quite some depth. It is going into the depth. The applied, I mean to say, why it is going into the depth. The reason of this presence of this anterior median fissure is that here lies the anterior spinal artery, which gives many branches, and these branches they travel posteriorly and then to the side to supply to the gray matter of the spinal cord and the white matter. So by this presence of the fissures enable those branches of the artery to go deeper and supply the blood. Okay, of course there are many other arteries are also there on posterolateral aspect, but this is probably the only one artery, the anterior spinal artery, has this spatial arrangement is there. On either side of the anterior median fissure, what you see is then a sulcus is seen, and this is called as anterolateral on either side, right side as well as. And from this anterolateral sulcus comes out the rootlets of the spinal nerves, okay, the ventral spinal root, okay, of those. And then when you go to the posterior aspect of this, it is better appreciated in this transverse section as it is seen on the top of the picture. What you see is that there is a posteromedian sulcus just opposite to the anterior median fissure on posterior aspect. There is no fissure. It is just a narrow groove which is seen, which is called as posteromedian sulcus. And from this posteromedian sulcus, as we will see in the next diagram, there extends a septum, what is called as the posterior median septum, where my arrow is moving. Now, then there are 2 sulci on either side of this posteromedian sulcus, and these are called as the posterolateral sulcus. And needless to say, because by this time you must have got an idea, this gives attachment to that of the rootlets of the dorsal spinal nerve. Okay, so these are the 2 sulci, one on anterior side and one on posterior side on either side of the median plane, which gives origin to the ventral spinal rootlets and the dorsal spinal rootlets. Quickly moving to the next slide. Now, the internal structure of the spinal cord can be better understood by a transverse section. This transverse section is from the thoracic region, and why it is from thoracic region, those who have studied it will be quickly understood that here the gray matter is exactly into the H-shaped structure, okay? And these two limbs of the H, that is vertical limbs, they are joined by this horizontal limb of the H in the gray matter. So the centrally placed is S-shaped gray matter, and by this time you must be well versed that what is gray matter? It is nothing but the collection of the nocelle, both motor, sensory, interneurons, glial cells, and blood vessels. They all form what is called as the gray matter. So the gray matter is just in the center and periphery of this transverse section of the spinal cord at the thoracic level is occupied by the white matter. And now what is white matter? It is nothing but, now in this case in the spinal cord, they are the bundles of the fibers, okay? They may be the ascending fibers, the descending fibers, mostly axon, but some may be dendroids, some may be myelinated, some may be unmyelinated, some may be from consisting of the somatic fibers which supply the body wall and the limbs, and then some may be from the visceral fibers too, okay, which we will discuss just now. So this is the gray and the white matter as seen under the transverse section of the spinal cord. The gray matter, again coming to the gray matter, there is a ventral or the gray commissure here, which is just passing on either side of the central canal, which is lined by the ciliated tall columnar epithelium. And then here you can see a white commissure also in front of the gray commissure, which is the continuation of the white matter on the right and that of the left side. This is the gray matter of the, the posterior horn. This is called as the posterior horn or the posterior gray column. Okay, horn is now less used. The gray column is more used in the neuroanatomy. And then since it is the thoracic spinal cord, there is a prolongation of the gray matter. This part is called as the lateral horn, okay, or lateral gray column. And then ventrally here, since I told you that this is the ventral aspect where anterior median fissure is present, you will see that this is the anterior gray column or anterior gray horn. Okay, so these are the parts of the roughly of that of the gray matter, and the white matter is divided also into the posterior white column or the posterior funiculus, then the lateral funiculus or the lateral white column, and anterior. How they are separated? They are separated because of the presence of the posterolateral and the anterolateral sulcus. I will not go into the detail. Passing to the next slide. Now, this slide will show you the white matter and the tract, and I told you the tract are the bundles of the fibers which are carrying the similar kind of the fibers ascending or descending which serve the same purpose. Okay, so these tracts in one diagram or this diagram where you are seeing the tracts in the blue color, it is showing the ascending tract, and ascending tract, they are the sensory tract. Okay, sensory tract. And then in this the diagram, the side diagram you are seeing in the maroon color, these are the tracts which are descending tract, and they are also called as the motor tract. Very quickly, I will just name those tracts which you already must be knowing. Here in the posterior column, white column or posterior funiculus, you see the two tracts which are ascending tract. They are sensory tract and they are going towards the brain, and they are called fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. And here the body is represented, the foot on this side towards the median septum, and then the head is on to the lateralmost side. Okay, so they are the gracilis carries the fibers from the lower half of the body, while cuneatus from the upper half. And these fibers, since they are sensory, and since I told you that they are going to the level of the brain, that means they are carrying the proprioceptive sensation which reaches to the level of consciousness. What is a proprioceptive sensation? These are the sensation which comes from the inner aspect or the body, that is from the muscle, okay, skeletal muscle. There are the various sensory and organs are located in the tendon. Then the sensory and organs which are located in the joint capsule, the ligaments, okay, right up to the synovial membrane. Whatsoever sensation of the muscle, joints and tendons are there, they are which are reaching to the level of your consciousness, they are carried by this fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. Okay, when you go to the lateral white column here, then you see the similar kind of the function carried out by the posterior spinocerebellar tract and the anterior or ventral spinocerebellar tract. They are also carrying the proprioceptive sensation from muscle and joint and tendon, but these sensations are going only to the cerebellum, not going to the higher level or the cerebrum. Hence, they are carrying the proprioceptive sensation which are not reaching to your level of the consciousness. Coming to those, tracts which are called as the anterior spinal and the lateral spinothalamic tract, since it is starting from the spinal cord and they are going right up to the thalamus. From thalamus, they will project to the cerebral cortex and they are carrying the sensation, important sensation of the pain, temperature, and the touch. The pain is the most important sensation in our body, which protect us from the various, harmful effects. Okay, so the remaining tract, which I have shown only two or the three, they are from the extrapyramidal. Okay, they are not going to the level of consciousness, they are going to the olivary nucleus, to the tectal superior colliculus, like that. Okay, which you must be knowing. Coming quickly to that of the descending motor tract, which are the motor tract. Here I will just mention in the lateral column, white column, there is this big one is the lateral corticospinal tract, and here its counterpart in the anterior white column, just close to the anterior median fissure, is the anterior corticospinal tract. These two tracts, they form important descending tract which will ultimately supply to the skeletal muscle. It is the voluntary contraction of the skeletal muscle depends on the intactness of these two tracts, which are bringing the fibers right from the brain, cerebral area number 4, okay, motor area, and ultimately they decussate in the medulla oblongata to form the two descending tract, that is lateral and anterior corticospinal, which will relay onto the motor neurons into the anterior horn cells. Okay, on the anterior gray column and on the anterior horn cell. The other tract, okay, they are the part of the extrapyramidal tract, okay, and they also help in the motor activity. Okay, I will limit it myself here and move to the next slide. Coming back to the internal structure of the spinal cord and the gray matter, most of the thing I have already covered about the gray matter. This is the posterior horn or the posterior gray column, which has the apex, body, and the base. Okay, and this contains the neurons which are small and they are sensory neurons. Okay, and they are the second order relay relay neurons in the pathway of the most of the sensory pathways. Okay. Then, if you go to the anterior column, okay, here, anterior gray column, there are the presence of the motor neuron. We are still in the thoracic spinal cord, okay. So, they form what is called as the they constitute the multipolar large neuron, which are 30 to 70 micron in the diameter, okay, of the sensory was very small, okay. And this large neurons, they send their axon through the ventral spinal root, ultimately to supply to the skeletal muscle, and stimulation of this neuron will lead to the contraction of the skeletal muscle. Now, in between this ventral and the dorsal gray column, this in the thoracic region, there is a presence of the lateral, projection, which extend from thoracic 1 to the lumbar 2 segment, and this is called as the lateral horn. And lateral horn also contain very small neurons, but they are multipolar and they are motor in nature. They are not sensory. So where are the two motor types of neurons are located? They are located in the anterior gray column or anterior horn and into the lateral horn, but it is limited only to certain part of the spinal cord, T1 to L2, where the preganglionic or presynaptic motor neurons are located, and from S2 to the S3 level, sacral segments, there will be in the similar type of the lateral horn, there will be the location of the neurons which are parasympathetic, but both are the part of the sympathetic and parasympathetic, which are located into the spinal cord. Now I move to the next slide. Coming to the sensory nuclei in the posterior gray column, and I will pass very quickly. It is the marginal nucleus. You must have learned in great detail in physiology. This is the marginal nucleus. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, going back to the same slide. Okay, this is the substantia gelatinosa, the second nucleus into the dorsal horn of the gray matter, and then there is a nucleus proprius. Okay, various kind of the sensory neuron will have their second order neuron here, which will have to cross to the opposite side because they are second order neurons which are located in this. Okay. And then there is the nucleus dorsalis and the Clark's column, and which is around, the diagram is not very accurate, okay? Now, this, somewhere it is 6th and the 7th lamina of the exit, they are located. But just concentrate on this column, okay, or the gray matter collection, which is called as intermedio-medial, okay, nucleus, which is a sensory nucleus for that of the visceral sensation. We will come again when I will reach to the last few slides of this talk, where we will talk about this nucleus again, and this is relay station for the visceral sensation, not for the somatic. So this remaining 4, 5 columns, the gray nuclei in the dorsal column, they are the relay station for somatic sensation. This is for the visceral sensation. Moving to the next slide. Okay. Coming to the motor nucleus in anterior and lateral gray column, or the lateral horn and the anterior horn, just concentrate first on this slide, and this is the from thoracic region, as I just told you. The same diagram is here. Here, if you will concentrate here onto the anterior gray horn, you will see the presence of the two group of the nucleus, okay? This two group of the nucleus, one is located medially and another is located laterally, okay? So these are the two groups are only found in the thoracic region, right? Then this is, I have already described the preganglionic autonomic neurons into the lateral, so I will not go. Now we will remain in the description of the anterior gray column, okay? And occasionally we'll go to the lateral column only. So we are on the motor part, okay? Coming to the enlargement. So we were talking about the simplest part of the spinal cord, which was the thoracic part of the spinal cord. Now I come to the enlargement. Okay, what is happening in the enlargement? That is, which gives origin to the brachial plexus, lumbar, and the sacral plexus of what are called as the limb enlargement. Okay, because they are supplying to the muscles of the limb. Let us see this diagram, which is here on this slide, where I am moving my pointer. Here the motor neurons are grouped into 3. Okay, they are grouped. Just see here. Very close to the median plane in the gray matter, these are the two nuclei are present, which are grouped into the medial group, and since it is on to the ventral aspect, it is called as ventromedial, and this is called as the dorsomedial. Okay, so medial group contained only 2. Okay, ventromedial and dorsomedial group of nuclei. Okay, I will come to the detail of these nuclei, don't worry. And then there is a second group which lies lateral to it, what is called as the central group of the nuclei. Okay, and this central group of the nuclei, 2 of these are present in the cervical part of the spinal cord, that is the phrenic and the spinal accessory nucleus, that is the 11th cranial nerve, and the phrenic nucleus and the spinal part of the accessory and nucleus, that is in the central group. But if you will see the lumbosacral enlargement, there will be one column or one group or one nucleus which is present in the central group, because this phrenic and spinal accessory, they don't extend beyond the C5 or C6 at the most, okay? But this group that is called as the lumbosacral group will remain present in the entire lumbosacral enlargement. There the phrenic and accessory will not, because of the diagram, to put it all in one diagram, this was just put here, okay? But remember that lumbosacral is in the lumbosacral enlargement. Then coming to the lateral group of the nuclei, okay? In the limb enlargement we are talking only, not in thoracic, okay? Not in thoracic spinal cord. Here there, this lateral group of nuclei, they are grouped as lateral group, and they are 3. one which is present close to the anterior margin of the gray matter here in the anterior horn. It is called as the ventrolateral because it is lateral group. Hence, it is called ventrolateral. And then just behind this, there is a dorsolateral. So one ventrolateral, another dorsolateral, and then there is a third nucleus which is dorsal to the dorsolateral, dorsal to the dorsolateral, where this pointer will move here. This nucleus is called as retrodorsal nucleus because it is dorsal to dorsal. That's why it is called as retro. And these three nuclei, they form the lateral group. This is a classical picture. What we are teaching to our students is decades, okay, since decades. Nothing has changed in this classical description of the cell, okay, groups of the neurons, right? Coming to more complicated thing regarding this anterior gray column. Just see here, in the lumbosacral enlargement, this is the lateral horn, and this nucleus is nothing but the same, the nucleus that is the preganglionic, okay, nucleus. Okay, this preganglionic in the lumbosacral enlargement is a part of the parasympathetic nucleus. So I'm passing to the new slide. Okay, let us see why the anterior horn or the gray horn, where the nucleus are arranged in different groups. Okay, these neurons are arranged in different groups. And there should be some reason for their arrangement into the different groups. Let us see in this part of the diagram, which was taken from the Carpenter, that is neuroanatomy by the Carpenter, and I met him in the Washington when I visited his institute, that is in Bethesda Armed Forces College. Okay, he was the professor at that time. Okay, so this is the gray matter. Say, for example, from the cervical enlargement, okay, let us see. So what are the neurons located and what portion of the limb and the trunk they will just innervate? We will start from the medial most part where it is written as the trunk. You can take it as the prevertebral and postvertebral group of the muscles which are supplied by the cervical enlargement. Then the trunk region, and I will just combine it with that of the muscles which are supplying to the shoulder too, okay, shoulder region, because we are dealing with the cervical enlargement, so it will be supplying to that of the shoulder. Then will come still laterally, there will be area where the motor neurons will be present and they will be supplying to the arm, then it will be supplying to the forearm, and then it will be supplying to the muscle of hand. That means your arm is extending, as I'm say extending from medial to lateral. If you just extend your arm, and then these are the neurons which coming from medial to lateral, supplying to the various parts of the upper limb, okay, various. The same thing you can take for the lower limb because time is very short. I'm not explaining those parts. And another important thing which you should notice from the second half of the Carpenter's diagram, and this part is that here not only in the various group, okay, he has shown the 7 groups are here, which I will explain further, not of his, my own study, I will tell you. These 7 groups of the motor neurons, they are not only containing the anterior horn cells, okay, motor, somatic, motor horn cell, which are large cell. I told you their size may go right up to the 70 millimicron, okay, but it is at the same time in the group there are presence of the, not only these are called as the alpha, but there are the presence of the gamma motor neuron, which are hardly 30 millimicron in the size, okay. And these are, as you know, they are going to the muscle spindle, which is an organ which ultimately controls the contraction and the tension into the skeletal muscle, okay. That is the alpha and the gamma. Gamma goes to the intrafusal and alpha goes to the extrafusal muscle fibers in a skeletal muscle. But at the same time, there is the presence of the neuron which are still very small, and they are interneuron. And one of the most important you must have read in physiology, they are the Ransa cell. And function of this Ransa cell you must be knowing. Let us see this distribution of the motor neurons to the various part of the upper limb. Okay, here are this group we have called as the medial group, and it is the medioventral or ventromedial, and this was called as the dorsomedial. So this is the medial group, first group, okay, ventromedial and dorsomedial. And the dorsomedial and ventromedial, they are going to supply the muscles which are in relation to the vertebral column, okay. So in front of the vertebral column are posterior extensor muscles, okay, up to the vertebral column. And then there is another group here which is represented by the same color, where three group of the nuclei are shown. They are going to that of the various muscles of the trunk, okay, and this may be, say for example, since it is the cervical enlargement, it may go to the sternocleidomastoid, it may go to the trapezius, it may go to the serratus anterior, and this may also go to the shoulder region, as I told you here, that it may go to that of the deltoid, it may go to the teres, major, minor, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, subscapularis. So all those groups which are along with those of the fixator muscles, okay, of the shoulder joint, they are supplying to the muscles, which is the muscle group called as shoulder. Now, after this, we come to a group which was described here into that diagram, which was called as the ventrolateral and dorsolateral. So, because lateral group, now the lateral group has, the central group is gone. Now the lateral group has started. This is the ventral and lateral. So it is ventrolateral, this which will supply the arm muscle. See, as the arrow is going into the arm muscle here. And then this is the dorsolateral group of the neurons, which is going to the forearm. And this is the retrodorsal, which is going to that of the hand region. Okay. So this is the way how this classical picture of the motor innervation we have been teaching you since decades, okay? Now, let us go to the next slide, and then I will just very briefly, since many teachers are also attending this webinar, for their benefit, I will tell you about a study which I conducted with my PhD student, R.V. Routal, okay? And we studied the motor neuron groups in total, complete human spinal cord, and found that our findings were different from this classical description. I will not go into much detail. I will just tell you there was only dorsomedial and ventromedial we saw only in the cervical region. It was not present into the thoracic region. And beyond that, okay, at this, then what they call a central group, okay, we could not find any central group. And what the phrenic nucleus, as I will show you in the next diagram, was the part of our medial group. That means it was placed in the medial group between dorsomedial and ventromedial. And the accessory spinal nucleus, okay, it was placed into the lateral group. So there was no central group. And those lateral nuclei, ventromedial, dorsomedial, and retrodorsolateral group in the lateral group, they were having many subdivisions, okay, and they were not named like, because there were so many, 11 different groups were found, okay. And this is just in brief that now the motor neuron groups concept is changing, okay, it is changing. Moving to the next slide, where very quickly I will explain you that the phrenic nucleus was not a central nucleus. It was present 1A and 1B. These are the medial group nucleus. It is the ventromedial and dorsomedial. And this, nucleus, that is the phrenic, it is started appearing at the level of the third, C3, and then it is placed between the 1 and 2, that is ventromedial and dorsomedial. It got enlarged and has invaded between the two groups, and this dotted line where my arrow is moving, and ultimately this was extending right up to the C5, upper level of C5. So between C3 to C5, this was a new finding of the location of the phrenic nucleus. Similarly, here in this diagram, you can just trace the presence of right from the lower medulla up to the C5. This is the presence of the spinal accessory, a large spinal accessory nucleus, which in the cross section you can see this dotted line in the lower medulla, then going, it is just shifting towards the lateral, touching to the margin of the gray matter here. So then how can it be in the central group? Okay, then it is dividing into 2A and 2B here at the C2 level. It has divided into, and ultimately it disappeared. It was extending right up to the C5 level. Okay, and this was divided in two groups. The upper A part of this nucleus was responsible for supply to that of the sternocleidomastoid, and the B part of this nucleus is responsible for supply to the trapezius. Okay, and we have explained that trapezius is not only supplied by this lower part of the nucleus located in the upper cervical, but there are other nerves may be supplying, not yet confirmed. Okay, now coming to the second aspect of this lecture, and it is the formation of the typical spinal nerve in the thoracic region. Okay, I will also quickly pass to some of the one or two slides here because you must be knowing it. Now in this, again, it is the thoracic part, which is the simplest part of the spinal. Now here, you can see here, there is the one ventral root comes out here, see this, and one dorsal root is here where the fusiform swelling is there, what is called as the dorsal root ganglion is there. And then these two roots, they unite to form what is called as trunk, which soon divide into the dorsal ramus, which goes and supply to the muscle and skin of the back. And then there is a long ventral ramus, which is also having connection with the sympathetic chain, paravertebral sympathetic chain. And this is having two connections, the gray and white rami communicantes, as I will show you in the adjacent diagram. And this long ventral rami, okay, ramus is going, okay, and it supplies to the skeletal muscle and to that of the, I mean to say, the skin fibers, okay, that is efferent fibers. And then these two, both dorsal and ventral, will carry the afferent fibers or sensory fibers also. Let us see here and just understand here. Say, for example, this is the dorsal root ganglion where the pseudounipolar neurons are located, okay, which divides into peripheral and the central process. The peripheral process brings the sensory impulses from the periphery, from skin, then its central process can relay into the dorsal ganglion, I mean say dorsal horn of the gray matter where sensory neurons are located, and then it may form a reflex arc also here, okay, and this motor neuron will come and will then just innervate that of the skeletal muscle. So on this side, the somatic component of this spinal nerve is shown here. On this side, I have shown the visceral component of this spinal nerve. Don't imagine that one side is visceral and another side is somatic. Both sides contain both, okay? Now this, the sensation from the smooth muscle of viscera is, I mean, say blood vessel, that is from tunica media, smooth muscle gland, the heart, various visceras. These are carried through this peripheral process of the dorsal root ganglion, and ultimately for the formation of a reflex arc, it will have a synaptic contact with that of the lateral gray column neuron. This is the preganglionic sympathetic neuron, which will send its axon, okay, and this axon will pass through the ventral root or anterior root, and then from the ventral ramus, it will pass through the white rami communicantes to relay into the thousands of neurons which are present in each sympathetic ganglion here, and then the postganglionic fibers or the axon of this neuron will arise, which is represented here in the dotted line, will ultimately go and supply to the motor fibers, to the smooth muscle and the gland for the secretion from gland or the contraction of the smooth muscle, or say in case of the cardiac muscle, okay, it will go to the cardiac muscle. So this is a very simple components of the how the typical spinal nerve is formed between T2 to T12, that is in almost in 11 intercostal segments, okay. Now above this and below this, T2 to T11, that is in cervical region, and below this it means lumbar and sacral region. These simple components are not there, and as we will see, there will be there will occur the formation of the plexus by the union of these ventral rami, which are coming from the different spinal segments, okay, of the spinal cord. Moving to the next slide. Now, these fibers I have already explained you, which are both. That means somatic fibers are present in the ventral root, which are motor, and at the same time the visceral fibers, that is sympathetic fibers, which are motor, both are present in the same ventral root. Similarly, the sensory fibers, which are bringing the sensation from somatic structure, mostly the skin or the muscle and nerves, muscle and tendon, they are present into the dorsal root, and at the same time, the sensory fibers, which are bringing the sensation from the viscera, interoceptive sensation, they are also present. Okay, so it is the motor and sensory buffer, somatic as well as visceral, which are present respectively into the anterior root and to that of the dorsal root. Moving very quickly to the next slide. Now, how the somatic nervous system works at the spinal level, okay? Now, the somatic nervous system, if you see here in this first diagram, which is the most important, most usual way of functioning of the central nervous system, I am just telling you this function because you should understand how the spinal cord is involved in the various body functions, okay? Now, suppose the sensation of the burn, that is the pain, okay, and temperature, it is being carried through this blue color fiber, which is the peripheral process of the dorsal root ganglion cell, okay, pseudo-unipolar, present into this ganglion, and then its central process will carry the same sensation here into the dorsal gray column, which is sensory, collection of various nuclei, which I have shown you into the dorsal root, okay, dorsal gray column, right? And then the second order neuron, it will rely on the sensory neuron, and whose axon will immediately cross to the opposite side because it is second order neuron, and then it will ascend up. Say for example here, because it is the pain and temperature fiber, it will ascend in the form of the lateral spinothalamic tract, and this will go to the thalamus. Since you have already read the brain now, it will go to the thalamus, and then from thalamus where it will relay, and then the third order neuron will start, which will go to the postcentral gyrus, where the sensation is to be pursued, and then the analysis of this sensation will be made in the premotor area, from where this will receive the impulses, and that will decide the the mode of the action in the area number 6, and then it will be projected onto the area number 4, that is the motor area, from where these fibers, which starts from the area number 4, motor fibers, the pyramidal tract will start, and the fibers axon from those pyramidal tract, okay, cell, this will ultimately relay into the anterior horn cell of the opposite side, and then what will happen, this will lead to the generation of the impulse by anterior horn cell here, which will pass through the ventral root, and ultimately this will come to the muscle, and muscle will lead to contraction, okay? It will. This is taking place in fraction of second, and this is in your knowledge. You are conscious about that, okay? What is happening and what I should do, that is there. That is the way how the central nervous system, okay, at the level of the spinal cord works. But then sometimes our spinal cord also work at, unconscious level, okay, by forming the reflex arc. In physiology, you must have learned a lot about this reflex arc, monosynaptic, polysynaptic arc. So just see here this diagram. So at this level, the spinal cord, without this sensation or without our awareness, this action can take place. The muscle can contract and protect you, okay, from this sensation, harmful sensation which you have received, okay, and without your knowledge, the action is taking place. Though it is a voluntary muscle which will contract as per your will, but here in this case, it is contracting without your knowledge, okay, without your command, Moving to the next slide. Now, why no plexus are formed? I have got 10-15 minutes. why no plexus are formed in cervical and the lumbosacral region, okay, but not in thoracic, but not. This is important. See here, the thoracic spinal cord here you can see, and you can see one thoracic spinal nerve, okay, one dorsal and the ventral rami, okay, dorsal and ventral rami. Now, the spinal cord that is right from T1 or T2, say for example, most conveniently from the first intercostal space to that of the 11th intercostal space, what you will see there is a intercostal nerve which supply the intercostal muscle. Okay, and then the dorsal ramus supply to that of the muscle of the back, okay, onto the posterior vertebral column, muscle attached to that. Okay, including the skin, okay, this will also supply to that of the skin. But this is the most simplest model of the nerve supply. Okay, and in the lower animal, which are evolutionary, very low segmented body, which have, say, for example, the snake, whose body is segmented body, this kind of the nerves which are present in our thoracic region, which are segmented spinal cord, and the nerve coming out from each segment will supply the each segment of the intercostal space, which has its own intercostal nerve, its own arteries, and its own vein is there. So that is a perfect segmented body, which is the retention of the evolutionary retention in some part. But as we move up into the neck region, or as we move into the abdominal region and sacral region, this segmentation is lost, okay, only preserved into the thoracic region, and hence, since it has to go to the segment only to supply it, dermatome as well as the myotomes, they have, so that segmentation is perfectly preserved and intact here. But because of the appearance, say for in snake, there were no limbs. As soon as the snake will have the limbs, hind limb and the forelimb, the muscle mass will also generate there to move the limbs, okay, and then it has to be controlled by the nerves, okay, and the nerves will have to migrate also, right, okay, and then the nerves cannot migrate, as I will show you in the next two diagrams. Okay, so they migrate, but they cannot, simple migration is not there, okay. So then that was the reason why the nerve plexus will be forming into the lumbosacral region and the cervical region, brachial plexus, and there are so many groups of the motoneuron, and these groups of motoneuron, they will send their axon, okay, while these myotomes are forming the muscle, individual muscle in the various segment of the body, okay, where even the limb bud has yet not developed. Okay, coming to the next slide. See here, this is the 7th week of intrauterine life, okay, and in the 7th week of intrauterine life, you must have read that somites formation has, and somites soon differentiate into the three: dermatome, myotome, and sclerotome. The myotome we should concentrate. Here the myotome will further differentiate into the epaxial and hypaxial muscle, and then epaxial muscles will form the muscles of the back region here, extensor muscles of the vertebral column, which will be supplied by the dorsal primary rami, okay, ramus, dorsal primary ramus, and then the muscle of the body wall, they will develop from hypaxial division of these myotomes, okay, and they will form the body wall. Say, for example, intercostal muscle in thoracic region, and then the abdominal muscle, though they have lost their segmental, representation, and they have fused, but still they are supplied by the lower intercostal nerve, right up to the subcostal nerve. The anterior abdominal wall muscles are supplied. This was a simple innervation of the body wall muscles, okay, of the muscles of the back, right? Here, but then the complication started when we started getting our upper limb and that of the lower limb. So in the 7th week of intrauterine life, this myotome will start migrating in the limb bud, which has started forming. See here, and this muscle in the limb bud, they have just started differentiating into the extensor group, and that of the flexor group will further differentiate into the abductor, adductor, medial rotator, lateral rotator. So many type of the muscles are differentiating, And it is said that, okay, which I will tell you in the next slide, okay. Now this limb bud which are forming here, they are carrying the myotomes because limb is growing now. So because it is few millimeters, it will go to the free fit long. See the distance from vertebral column to the tip of your finger, okay, is a large distance, and muscles which are present in your hand, say for example introcei, the thinner and hypothinner and many other muscles which are there in the hand, they are ultimately have come from the myotomes which was near the midline, okay, in the I mean to say near the median plane, and from there it has migrated. While they are migrating, at the same time they are differentiating, okay. So this, you must have seen that when you are reading the now supply or root value of a muscle, you must have seen that hardly muscles are supplied by a single spinal segment or single root value, but they are supplied by 2, 3, okay, mostly by 3 spinal segments, adjacent spinal segment. So this makes the further complication, because then the muscle mass is formed by the fusion of the 3 adjacent myotomes. 3 adjacent myotomes. Okay, a single muscle is formed by the fusion, and then it will have to migrate to the more distant places. But it cannot migrate unless and until the nerve will come and innervate it, okay? Then only this muscle will start differentiating and will start. So it will drain the nerve supply along with it. So a muscle which is formed by the fusion of 3 adjacent myotomes will have thus the 3 spinal nerves, okay, coming out through the 3 ventral root to supply that muscle, motor supply of that. And same is true for that of the sensory supply from that of the muscle. Moving to the next slide. Now this diagram, very quickly I will come to this. This will tell you these are the 3 segments of a spinal cord are shown, and just remember this orange color nucleus here, and this where till now I was showing you in the, I mean to say, cross sections, and they were called as nuclei, but they are not actually circumscribed mass. They are elongated column extending craniocaudally into the spinal cord. Okay, some are extending very long. As I said you, the column number 1 and 2, they are extending throughout the spinal cord, okay, which we have investigated, okay. Now this, I mean to say, nucleus, okay, column, you call it nucleus or the column, it is extending into the 3 spinal segment, and it is giving the anterior root or the ramus to the I mean to say root here. It is to the root here. These are going to the 3 spinal nerves, okay, ventral root of the 3 spinal nerve, and then this is recombination is taking place, and ultimately all the 3 nerves, they are coming closer and going to supply to that muscle. So there is a crisscrossing and redistribution of fibers is taking place. Okay, what I have written, let me see. A muscle may be innervated by axons of few adjacent spinal segments, but these axons arise from a single motor column. See here, this is single motor column. This muscle is supplied by the 2 nerves, and there may be 3rd nerve also here. So they are coming from a single motor column. That is also important. And coming to this slide where I will tell you and another. Now this brachial plexus, lumbar, or I mean to say, these plexus are formed very close to the midline, very close, right? And here that recombination of nerves is taking place, mixture, intermixture, and network of the formation of the nerve is taking place. And once it has taken place in the plexus, then these nerves are traveling to a long distance. For example, here, see this, it is ulnar nerve is here, okay, and this will go right up to the hand. Oh, where is my arrow? Ulnar nerve, it is going to the hand. Radial nerve is going right up to the, for muscle, it is going up to the forearm, and for median nerve, and then the musculocutaneous, which will supply the muscles of the arm. So these 4 nerves are ultimately formed from that of the brachial plexus formation, which will go to supply at least 40-45 muscles which are present into our upper limbs, okay, into upper limb. Now, an important fact is that This formation of this nerve plexus is a functional adaptation due to the fusion of myotome, which I have already covered, and its migration to the distant place. Okay, in nutshell, you can say that since they are dragging these nerve fibers along with that, okay, along with themselves when it is going right from vertebral column to that of the thumb, okay, or to that of the hand, it is going. And then for this migration and differentiation into flexor, extensor, medial rotator, abductor, adductor, it is necessary. It is very important for the contact of these muscles with that of the nerves. Unless and until a nerve, motor, and plates will not form, okay, which will come in contact with the muscle fiber, that muscle is not going to differentiate into the various kind of muscle. Okay, so that means some molecular, I mean to say, control is taking place at the time of the differentiation of this muscle in the form of these, I mean to say, when they come in contact. And once the contact is achieved, then they start migrating and just they drag these nerves to their destination. Now then comes the question, why this intermixing and everything is taking place? Now see here, say for example, here there are the four nerves has formed very close to the root of the neck, and they have come through axilla into the arm. When they reach to the arm, there are only four nerves are there, and they contain multiple fibers which are coming from multiple spinal segments. Okay, that means thousands of fibers which in the form of the axons are present in that. And all these four nerves, then they are, imagine that they are just like the wire cables. They are covered and insulated well with the plastic cord. Okay, and these cable, okay, and when they are dragging, when they are traveling from that of the axilla towards the periphery or the terminal end of the limb, they are go on giving the nerve fiber. Let us see, just for example, the radial nerve is here, and then you can see the radial nerve is formed by the posterior cord, and this, before this formation of radial nerve, even it gives the nerve to the subscapularis, upper and lower subscapularis, then thoracodorsal nerve, it will give an axillary nerve which will supply to the deltoid, teres minor, and then radial nerve will supply to the three heads of the triceps. The root value is 5, 6, 7, and then it will go to the brachioradialis, extensor carpi radialis longus, brevis, then supinator, then various muscles present onto the dorsal aspect of the forearm. Okay, and ultimately it will supply to the extensor. In that is where the root value is the 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so you have seen that those muscles which were most close to the median plane, they get the fibers from the upper part of the brachial plexus, and those muscles which are at the distal place, they are getting fibers from that of the lower segment. And this become possible because there will be the fibers present, thousands of fibers present, consisting of the different spinal segment, and which have played and form a network and ultimately come to that nerve which was needed to supply, say for in case of the radial nerve, the extensor muscle. No nerve fibers which will go to the flexor muscle will be found in the radial nerve. That is the beauty of the formation of that of the brachial plexus. So this is an easiest and economic way by which the fibers can reach to the target muscle without tracing this fiber right from segment to the termination. Otherwise, there would have been hundreds of fibers going from the various segments to the termination, say for example, dorsal intrusi, say for example, thin arm muscle. So many fibers they will, but it is not. There are only 4 nerves, and this in the last forearm, there will remain only 3 nerves, which are in sheath, say they are in the form of the cables, and which will supply to, whatsoever respective nerve fiber when that muscle is approached, okay, by that in the path of the nerve. I think if the time is over, hello, Mayank, may I speak further, or shall I, there is a lot of things remaining.
Yes, I can understand, but we have already surpassed that time. I would request to summarize yeah.
Now, the last part was that autonomic nervous systems, okay, because the spinal cord is a seat for the sympathetic as well as, parasympathetic neuron located in the lateral horn. And this will go to the target organ, which are the viscera in the form of the preganglionic and postganglionic. And this also has two components, which books are silent about that. There is a component in the autonomic nervous system, which is the sensory fibers, okay? From each and every viscera, they are coming, and the motor component is there. And then we don't know about which tract is ultimately controlling these various neurons which are present into the lateral horn, that is the preganglionic sympathetic fiber which are present into the lateral, how they are ultimately controlled, from where the impulse. And this is said to be an unknown tract which is coming from the various sources, say for example from the hypothalamus, which is considered as the higher center for sympathetic and parasympathetic, and that is considered as the hypothalamo-spinal tract. And at each level, they are supplying to that of the motor neurons, preganglionic and sympathetic, and they are giving order for them to contract the smooth muscle or secrete the secretion from the glands, or control the regulate the lumen of the blood vessels. Okay, so this I will finish here. Thank you very much for attending the seminar, and I will be very happy to answer your question if I can. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayank.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for such a nice presentation. Though I can understand the limitation with time, it's difficult to summarize a vast topic like this in such a small span of time. Still, thank you so much for all the presentation. Now we have a lot of questions which I will take one by one. So I would request you to answer. Now
Yes.
So the first question is how to detect whether a horizontal cross section of a spinal cord is at what level?
How to?
How to detect? Yeah, sir.
How it is at what level?
Right, sir. Right.
Say, for example, if the cross section is passing at C5 level, it is just not possible. You cannot just identify with just only on the cross section level, just seeing the section under the microscope. Okay, you can broadly just say that this is from the cervical region because its morphology of the white and gray matter is like that, and roughly by getting an idea how many nuclei are present in gray matter. Okay, morphology of the outline of that can be helpful. In the thoracic, you cannot differentiate whether it is the T5 level or T8 level, okay, because there is nothing, unless and until you do not trace a segment of the spinal cord by tracing the nerve, okay, roots of the nerve from where they are taking origin. It is impossible. It is not possible, okay.
Right, sir. The next question is, please explain the identification of shape of TS spinal cord at various levels.
Okay, I have intentionally omitted this part. Okay, this is based on the shape of the gray matter, of the gray horn mostly. Okay, in the lumbar region, in the cervical region, it is quite broad. Okay, if you have seen so many nuclei, it has to accommodate it. So shape is different. Okay, shape is different. When you go to the cervical region, it becomes very narrow, S-shape, exactly S-shape. And here in the cervical region, it's the ventral rami ventral horn of the gray matter was horizontally expanded, and it has its own shape. When you go to the lumbar region, okay, there the shape is different, though again the ventral horn is quite broad, okay, but shape is different. Another fact on which you can see whether it is from cervical, thoracic, or that of the lumbosacral region is the amount of the white matter. The white matter is maximum in cervical because it is ascending and descending level. As it goes down and down, most of those fibers, they go on ending. So the amount of the white matter as compared to the gray matter will be more in the cervical region. It will be less in the lumbosacral region. Okay, that diagrams are given in every book, okay, about this differentiation of the spinal cord.
Right, sir. So the next question is why there is decreased white matter as we go down in spinal cord?
Because most of the descending tract, they keep on ending. Okay, they are ending, right? That's why. Okay, it has to decrease. It has to decrease. So that means all the fibers of pyramidal tract or that of the extrapyramidal tract, which are starting from the brain stem or the brain itself, that is from a motor area, they are ending at different levels. Okay, at each spinal segment level, some of the fibers they end because they have to supply to the various motor nuclei. They have to supply to other component. Okay, and that's why the number is decreasing. Okay, only the sympathetic fibers, they are the same which are going from, and they are added up. Okay, they are added up, but then the mass of the sensory fibers in comparison to that of motor fiber is less. So that's why the total mass of the white matter in the cervical region is more as compared to that of the lumbar region.
Right, sir. Another question is the significance behind arrangement of bundles of nerve fibers below the cona mandularis.
Conus medullaris. Okay. Now this
Yeah.
nerve fiber are the actual spinal nerves. They are just, I mean to say, bundle comes here. And this I have told you that in the fetal age, the length of the spinal cord, that means up to 3 months of fetal age. Okay, not beyond, at least up to 3 months of fetal age, the length of the spinal cord is same as compared to that the length of the vertebral canal, that means vertebral column. Okay, in which this vertebra. But as the age advances, when the child, I mean say the baby is born, then this spinal cord is at the level of lower border of L3. Okay, that means it has ascended. It is nothing like ascending. It is the relative growth between the spinal cord and the vertebral column. Vertebral column is growing at a faster rate as compared to the spinal cord, and after birth this growth further slows down. Okay, hence this comes to the level of L1. That means it is not reducing in length. Okay, rather some length is increasing, but it is not as compared to that of the vertebral canal. I mean, say vertebral column, which is growing at a faster rate. Just see the vertebral column in a baby, okay, 1 year old, okay, child, and then see the vertebral column in 18, 19 years old boy or girl. There's a lot of difference. And with that, I mean to say pace, the spinal cord is not growing because most of the neurons, they stop dividing after birth. Okay, and the number of the fibers or taking origin from these neurons, they also don't grow, except that the myelination which takes place. Okay, so this is the relative growth. Okay, relative growth. And the scientists, those who work on the spinal cord level, as we have worked on the spinal, we have to be very careful to trace this the segmental level, because unless and until we will not go right up to the intervertebral foramina, tracing this spinal now, from which is intervertebral foramina it is coming out, we will not be able to tell. This is the answer to the first question also. Which segment of the spinal cord we are dealing with. Okay, so a scientist has to be very careful in identifying this spinal cord segment, and this is in a retrograde way. You have to first identify the spinal nerve from which intervertebral foramina it is coming out, and trace it back towards the spinal cord, and then demarcate that, okay, from which portion of it the dorsal and ventral rootlets are taking origin. That will be the correct identification of the spinal cord.
Right, so now I'll be taking a last question due to time constraint. There are many more questions which are there. Right. So as of now, I'll be giving you one last question. Please explain spinal processes of pia mater and their clinical significance.
Pia mater spinal processes? Oh, these are the dentate nuclei, okay, and they are coming from the side of the onto the lateral aspect of the spinal cord as a triangular fold, and which gives attachment to the lateral surface, side of the vertebral canal, the dura mater. So the dura, this just provides a support on the hanging of the spinal cord. Okay, in the hanging, nothing significant is there because these are just nothing but the fold of the pia mater or pia mater. It is said.
Thank you so much, sir. So like by seeing the presentation, I can easily say that the more you visualize the neuroanatomy, the better understanding you have. This is what I have grasped with the presentation I have just seen you have presented a lot of pictorial graphs and photos. So the only message which I got, the more you visualize, the better understanding should be in neural
Now
anatomy.
let me tell one more thing. All these diagrams except that of Carpenter, all are from my book only. Okay, which you have published. Okay, which Wolters Kluwer has published. 100% diagram except one. They are from this. Okay, from the book itself. Okay.
Fine. Thank you,
sir. One last question, sir. So one more question that is there on the chat call, that they had repeated twice actually. So what are splanchnic nerves and how they are formed?
What are
splanchnic nerves? SPHLANCHANIC.
Oh, splanchnic now. They are the splanchnic now. Okay, that I could not tell you. If my diagram is there already in your screen, okay, I am having that diagram. Everybody is having this diagram which is on my screen, or it has gone?
No, sir, we can still see that.
Right now.
So it's there, yeah.
Yeah,
we can see your diagram, sir.
They are called as the splanchnic nerve, and these splanchnic nerves are the fibers of the sympathetic and parasympathetic preganglion. What is a preganglion or presynaptic? So far, I told you that the neurons are located in the lateral horn cell for preganglionic, sympathetic, as well as in sacral region for that of the parasympathetic, the axon which will arise from there. Now, this axon, when bypass the sympathetic chain, and in the case of the parasympathetic, it will always bypass the chain here because it is nothing to do with the sympathetic chain. So these nerves, okay, which are going, okay, bypassing. Let us see the first diagram here in the green color. And in the green color, you are seeing that the fibers arising from T5 right up to that T11 or T12, they are going here in a bunch without relaying into the postganglionic neuron in sympathetic chain. And here in the diagram, they are shown to the lateral side, but they go to the medial side, and then they come to the three different ganglia. Okay, that is called as the celiac ganglia, superior mesenteric ganglia, and inferior mesenteric ganglia, where the postganglionic neurons are present. Otherwise, they were present in the sympathetic chain. But here they are present in front of the vertebral column, in front of the aorta, from where the great vessels are taking origin. Say, for example, celiac trunk, superior mesenteric artery, and inferior, where there is a presence of a plexus along with this ganglia. And in this ganglia, the postganglionic neurons are there. So all these nerves which are bringing this sympathetic preganglionic fiber right up to these three ganglia, okay, they are the splanchnic nerve. But there is one more splanchnic nerve, as you see here in the pelvic region, which is for the parasympathetic, and this is called as the pelvic splanchnic nerve. So there is a parasympathetic splanchnic nerve, that is the pelvic splanchnic nerve, which takes origin from S2, S3, and S4, and there are the three greater, lesser, and least splanchnic nerve, which takes origin from the lateral horn, comes out through the ventral root, and then they form the splanchnic nerve. And this splanchnic nerve, then they are relayed not into the paravertebral sympathetic chain, but they relay into the ganglia, which are situated in the prevertebral ganglia. They are called as, in relation to that of the, arteries, great arteries, which are taking origin, and because the postganglionic fibers then have to travel along with the blood vessels. Okay, they have no nerve. They form a plexus on the tunica adventitia of these great vessels, and they also branch, and then they go ultimately to that of the target organ, which are viscera. Okay, in this diagram, so many viscera are shown where this splanchnic nerves are sending their, postganglionic fibers. Okay, so this is for sympathetic as well as parasympathetic. I'm sorry that last 5-6 slides I could not explain. Okay, next question, if it is there, please.
No, sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for Dr. Pal for your time, and I would like to thank you for giving us such an informative, presentation on anatomy subject, neuroanatomy for sure. And I also like to, thank all our participant attendees who are there, who have spent their time and, getting to know more about the neuroanatomy section of Dr. Pal itself. And we also promise all attendees that we're going to bring some more such sessions in the coming future as our webinar series Renaissance. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you to the students and to the teachers also. And thank you also, Mayank and other team members. I thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.